Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Dodgers Dawgs as part of the Dodgers Daily Network. My name is Austin Brubaker. I will be your host this evening, and tonight's going to be a little bit of a interactive type of show tonight. That's really the setup of what I'm trying to do with tonight. Obviously, within the past week or so, the Los Angeles Dodgers have made a few changes to their roster. Or perhaps, and this could be the mindset that a lot of people are having, some of the moves that the Dodgers did not make to their roster perhaps stand out a little bit more when you're talking about the Major League Baseball trade deadline. Major League Baseball trade deadline has come and has passed. It was July 31st, and there was an insane amount of action that happened for a lot of different teams. You saw teams going above and beyond to go out, and particularly in this market, go out and get elite relief pitching help. The Los Angeles Dodgers knew that was a need that they needed to address, especially with right-handed relievers. And they went out and traded for one particular right-handed reliever. They also added an outfield bat by the name of Alex Call. Brock Stewart was the right-handed reliever that they added. And then they decided to trade a couple of different pieces, and then they called that the deadline. Those are the moves that the Los Angeles Dodgers decided to make. We're going to talk in depth a little bit about some of those moves in particular. Casey and I actually had a really good show this past Wednesday. No, not past Wednesday. I believe it was whatever the trade deadline was. I think it was Friday that we recorded it. Released it on Friday. Please go out, check out that, because there is a lot of back and forth that was done, and there's a lot of difficult questions that I had to answer for, talking about the approach that the Los Angeles Dodgers had. Casey had all those questions. Today, I want to present you guys with the opportunity to be able to ask difficult questions, and for the Los Angeles Dodgers, did they do enough to give themselves the best possible chance to win the World Series in 2025, or did they do everything that they could to win as many World Series championships as they possibly can from here on going out? Those are going to be questions that we're going to be answering. Those are questions that we're going to be talking about. But any sort of questions, any sort of thoughts and opinions that you guys have about the trade deadline, particularly when it comes to my thoughts and opinions on that, that's what we're going to be primarily focused on, because a lot of times with the shows that I have, we typically look at things from a little bit of a big picture type of perspective. I don't really have the coaching expertise that somebody like Casey or Coach Holt or even Coach Barikoff has, but I have a mindset of overall trends and a little bit of knowledge about the way that rosters are structured and what some of the advantages that the Dodgers have, perhaps in comparison to other teams, or some things that they particularly need to look out for. I have a little bit of thoughts in that aspect, so we're going to keep things a little bit on the grand scale. But happy that you guys are tuning in. History Man, thank you very much for joining us. Go Dodgers, and God bless. God bless. Back to you as well. Gregory, good afternoon. Hello, back to you. Andre, thank you very much for joining us. Great job, Austin. I'm actually happy that the Dodgers improved their farm system during the trade deadline, because ultimately that will be how they will best improve their team for next year. Yeah, we will get into that in just a second, talking about the overall state of the farm system, as well as some potential aspects of where that could potentially be of benefit for the Dodgers, especially, and this is a lot of this is going to be in comparison to the Padres, which I don't like to pick on any particular Major League Baseball franchise, even though Dodgers and Padres are rivals. I don't typically like to do that or single out, because I think the Dodgers look at things from a big picture, and I don't want to solely put my mindset on one particular team. What I think that is going to illustrate is a little bit of a difference in philosophy, Dodgers philosophy versus some of the Padres philosophies, and what they're able to do with that, particularly when it comes to the approach at this upcoming deadline. We'll be talking a little bit about that. Showtime LA, hey Austin, is there any update on Josue de Paula? And he also mentions that Zaire Hope is on fire. Zaire Hope's awesome, absolutely awesome. Both of those guys, outfielders, currently at the high level of the Dodgers organization with the Great Lakes Loons. Big fan of the Great Lakes Loons. You can get this hat, and you can also, I just got this, the short sleeve hoodie right here. You can get both of those, loons.milbstore.com. Both of those players are phenomenal. Josue de Paula, if you don't know, it was recently added to the injured list. He did travel to the team with the team to Fort Wayne, which typically If there was a long-term extended injury, for example, what happened to Mike Sirota, he's not currently traveling with the Great Lakes Loons. Josue de Paula is, which makes me believe, and this is based off of zero inside information, that at some point he will return from the injured list. Hopefully that comes pretty soon. He would just be another added force to the Great Lakes Loons offense, and he's a really good upcoming player for them. Andre, we will not know if they did enough for the playoffs. If the Stars play to their level, no one will beat the Dodgers. Incredibly concerning about Mookie Betts at this point, though. Yes, absolutely with Mookie Betts. And that could be a little bit of a conversation that we have. I know some of the other shows really dove deep into the Mookie Betts struggles, but it's really important to keep in mind just how much Mookie Betts has been struggling. Overall this season, he has been a below league average hitter. And if we're talking about, and go ahead and pull up, because I think this is in part some of the reasons why the Dodgers have struggled, and we'll go ahead and pull up some of the numbers here, hopefully in just a second. The offense just hasn't lived up to what they are able to have or what they're supposed to be. So these are the numbers since June 1st, just the overall offensive contributions that the Dodgers have had from individual players. They have been below league average as a unit on offense. And when we're talking about Mookie Betts since July 1st is only hitting 181, 236 on base percentage, 287 slugging. That is a 43 WRC plus. Now you can see he's still providing positive output from the defensive position, which currently he's at the shortstop position. But it has been a struggle for Mookie Betts, to say the least. And you're talking about an offense that they're getting a lot of home runs, or have gotten a lot of home runs for Shohei Ohtani, but he's striking out a little bit more. As long as he's hitting for some power, I think that's going to justify some of the swing and miss that he has. But Freddie Freeman is swinging and missing far more than he usually does. A 32% strikeout percentage since July 1st is a bit concerning. And you can see some of these other ones are up. Mookie Betts' strikeout percentage during his time is not, it is well below league average, but it's just the quality of contact that just doesn't seem to be there from Mookie Betts. He has to be able to turn it around in order for this team to be able to reach the places that they need to be at. Mookie Betts has to be that type of player, and ultimately the star players are going to define and be the main reasons why the Los Angeles Dodgers are able to go far during the postseason this year and are able to go out there and make a lot of headlines during the actual season. There wasn't any main attraction when it came to offensive pieces at the deadline, which you're talking about pieces that the Dodgers typically like to go and trade some of their high prospects for. If they're able to do that, they will either reinvest those pieces into younger guys to keep the farm system going good, or when they identify a talent that they really like, they typically either go for a really, really solid position player talent or a starting pitcher. And there really wasn't a need for the Dodgers at this trade deadline. You can have some arguments about this, but ultimately a lot of guys are coming back healthy, which we saw Blake Snell go out there and, despite the 2 home runs, pitched really, really well for the Los Angeles Dodgers. There really wasn't a whole lot of need for the starting pitchers. And I don't think there was that difference maker on offense that they were particularly looking for that was as significant of an upgrade as to what they were looking for. Yes, I know there's a lot of rumors about Steven Kwan, and it sounded like the Dodgers were ultimately trying to go out and get a Steven Kwan. But this was actually something I was kind of interested in when diving a little bit deeper into a guy by the name of Alex Call, who the Dodgers actually did acquire, outfielder from the Washington Nationals, now a Los Angeles Dodger. This was when I was looking at outfielders, guys that played outfield in particular that had at least, I believe it was 100 plate appearances on this season. Because one of the calling cards, and one of the things that, if you particularly pay attention to some of the rumors that the Dodgers were invested in, they were looking for guys that were a little bit grinders at the plate at the bat. Guys that perhaps walked a decent amount but didn't strike out a whole lot. And one of the positions that they were particularly looking at was in the outfield. And when we were talking about Alex Call, he is, for outfielders, one of only 10 outfielders that, when we're dividing their walks divided by strikeouts, that percentage is 0.7 or above. And for each one of those guys, you're talking about a weighted runs created plus, meaning their actual bat, all being above league average. Alex Call, if you're using that comparison, has a 11.2% walk percentage and a strikeout percentage currently under 15%. And when that equates, when you do all of the output that he's able to do offensively, it's a 114 WRC plus. And we're talking about some of the other hitters that are outfielders or have played outfield this year. Talking about Jeff O'Neill. He's not Jeff McNeil, I should say. He wasn't available at the trade deadline. Tyler Freeman was a little bit of an interesting case, but I think the thing that deterred the Dodgers away from ever potentially pursuing him was the fact that his defense has not really been that great this year. Kyle Tucker obviously wasn't available. Steven Kwan fits this type of profile, similar-ish to what an Alex Call did. Alex Call's right down here. Steven Kwan's right here. Steven Kwan has struck out as much as he's walked, and that's the really low percentage. Very high contact type of player. But if we look at the overall production that he has put this year, so far it's been a 110 WRC plus versus an Alex Call, a 114. I'm sure there was a lot of communication back and forth as far as the calling card, and there's certainly skill sets that you can talk about and prefer Steven Kwan, who's been more consistent of a player, that you probably prefer in that type of profile, maybe just a little bit more than Alex Call, but both of them, results-wise, to this point in the season, relatively similar. And if you're talking about a price point being dramatically different between going out and getting a Steven Kwan that likely would have cost them a Josue de Paula or a Zaire Hope and then additional pieces versus a guy like an Alex Call who would not prevent you from going out and potentially pursuing even better outfielders going forward in the future, that was ultimately the decision that the Dodgers made. Also on this list of pretty close to even walks divided by strikeouts that are outfielders with 100 plate appearances or more. Juan Soto obviously wasn't available. Nathan Lucas from Toronto wasn't going to be available. Jung-Hoo Lee is under a bigger contract for San Francisco, plus they won't trade with the Dodgers. TJ Friedl, Cincinnati, one of their top hitters. Cincinnati wasn't trading. And then Fernando Tatis Jr. So when we're talking about this exclusive list, when you're talking about guys that have a good mix of contact ability, plus being able to grind out at bats, plus the ability to be somewhat productive, it seemed like a pretty good case for the Dodgers to potentially go out there and like the profile of Alex Call and see what he can do, especially because after this season, he has 4 years of club control, meaning they're getting 4.5 years of club control where he can be that fourth outfield type and provide a little bit of stability at the back of the outfield, plus be able to potentially step up where needed. And if one of the outfielders, whether that be Michael Conforto, who actually, if we were looking back at the results since June 1st for Dodgers players, Michael Conforto has been a 118 WRC plus hitter. He's hitting 253, 325, and 453, which means that his numbers are starting to get a little bit better, and he's only striking out less than 21% of the time. So he hasn't, at least in the last month or so, necessarily been the issue with the team. But if he kind of reverts back to that, you have a professional hitter that potentially could step up and take a little bit more of a demanding role that has started to prove himself a little bit more, or at least put him in opportune times to be able to take advantage. We did get a super chat, and I thank you for sending this. 300G JW with the $9.99 super chat. Thank you very much for sending that. Hey Austin, seeing what it cost the Phillies, would you match that for Duran, knowing you were anti-trading prospects? I think they need a second bullpen arm. So that actually brings up a really fascinating question. Should the Dodgers have traded particularly for a guy like Yohan Duran? And I think that I've wrestled with that a little bit with what I think the Dodgers necessarily should have done, because my argument when going through this trade deadline, and particularly when it came to bullpen pieces, I was surprised by the rate of which these bullpen pieces were going off the board. Particularly guys with many years of club control. Typically teams don't necessarily like to trade the high-end prospects, particularly when it comes to bullpen pieces, because of the volatile nature of relief pitchers. Relief pitchers can come up, come down. Yohan Duran, I believe last year had a 3.64 ERA for him on the season, which is not bad in any way, stretch, or form, but is a little bit different from the sub-2 Yohan Duran that we are used to seeing right now. And I think there was different price points and stuff that some of these relief pitchers were going off of. With Yohan Duran, with the Phillies organization, which typically I don't like to identify relief pitchers as far as the number prospect this pitcher or this player is within a player system. But I think it's very noteworthy how these guys are interpreted by the industry, just because while I see a lot of potential in each one of these guys, also teams are looking for some sort of highly ranked guy or some sort of highly thought of guy, only with the idea that they can go around and turn that guy into something that is really, really good. And when we're talking about Yohan Duran, it did cost a major league, basically ready guy with a guy like a Mick Abel, guy who can turn into the Twins organization and be a frontline starting pitcher, or potential to be a 3 to 5 at the very least starting pitcher, and then a highly thought of young catching prospect for them. Both of those guys were ranked 2 and 4 in the Philly system if you go by Major League Baseball pipeline as far as their rankings. Whether or not I would have done that, I think that was perhaps when you're talking about a lot of the top line guys, perhaps one of the more reasonable type of trades that you could have done out there. I still would have hesitated with that asking price, only because I think there potentially could have been some comparable arms to be able to go out and get there and get. So I think there's a couple of different elements, and this is where you perhaps could divulge into different topics. So for me, I'm not against trading prospects. What I'm against is utilizing all of your resources in an ineffective way. Meaning by that is, I think it is a far more effective way to go out there and utilize the resources, utilize the prospect capital to go out there and get either a really solid position player or, if needed, starting pitching. When it comes to bullpen help, I am scared by the volatility of the relief pitchers, as well as the inherent risks that come with relief pitchers, especially relief pitchers that throw with incredible velocity. And when we're talking about a guy like Yohan Duran with the incredible velocity that he has, and guys like Mason Miller or any one of these elite level arms, I think there's a lot of volatility that can happen within each one of these elements that concerns me as a relief pitcher. And I think there potentially could have been other options that they could have turned to. So when you're talking about specific high-priced relievers, especially relievers that have multiple years of club control, utilizing your top guys, when we're talking about this, when we're talking about Yohan Duran, you're talking about probably, and this is kind of similar-ish to the package and stuff that has been brought up by other people, not by myself. But if you're talking about an Eduardo Quintero and a Jackson Ferris, probably, and then some, because that wouldn't get that wouldn't be quite as major league ready arm. You could replace a Jackson Ferris with perhaps somebody that's major league ready, perhaps somebody that was injured, but I don't know how valuable the Minnesota Twins would see that. It's very difficult to be able to compare these type of packages to what the Dodgers necessarily could have presented. I think it is fair to say that the Dodgers could have matched this type of offer, but I would have went in a little bit of a different direction in that aspect. So that is one aspect of it. The other aspect is, should the Dodgers have done more or traded for more relief pitchers than what they actually got? And this is where I'm in agreement with a lot of people that are frustrated with the Los Angeles Dodgers trade deadline. While I not necessarily would have paid top price for relievers, meaning that I don't think that the price point of what it would have cost and the prospect capital of what it would have taken to acquire the Mason Miller, the Yohan Duran, or so on and so forth, would have necessarily been worth it for the Los Angeles Dodgers in the long term. I think there could have been other choices, because I know that there is a lot of question marks that at least I have as somebody who's outside the organization looking on in as far as the health of relief pitchers. And I think this is where there can be some frustration of they probably should have made one additional move, or a lot of people think they should have made one additional move. For example, with guys like a Phil Maton, who I believe only cost them for the Texas Rangers the number 26 prospect within their system. Might have been an additional guy that's put in there right now, but it wouldn't have been necessarily a heavy cost. And we're talking about the comparable numbers of which these guys have. This is something that I just put together. And this we can utilize to analyze the pitcher that they did get in Brock Stewart. When you're talking about a guy like a Phil Maton, comparing them to some of the other numbers that are on here, it's a 2.35 ERA so far on the season with pretty good comparables as far as projecting going forward. The guys down at the bottom three are the big main relievers that were traded: Duran, Jax, and Mason Miller. You also have David Bednar, Seranthony Dominguez was another good option, Ryan Helsley, and then a Phil Maton. So when you're talking about comparable cost of what it have, he potentially could have been a good choice. Really good ERA estimators, gets a lot of swing and miss and whiff on a lot of his pitches. And then has been really good against right-handed hitters, which I think was primarily something that the Dodgers really targeted. And then the expected quality of contact or the expected results from the quality of contact would have been something that would have been really solid as well. That's kind of a route that I would have gone down. You also could have looked at, and I think Texas did a really good job late at the trade deadline, going out and getting a couple of really good relievers, Danny Coulombe and Phil Maton. That could have been a target that the Dodgers could have went down. They could have also went out and gotten somebody like a Seranthony Dominguez, who doesn't have a lot of years of control. I think having an additional arm would have been something that I would at least feel a little bit more comfortable, especially with the question marks of who's going to be healthy and who's going to be ready to go during the postseason. One of the things that potentially could have prevented, and this is something that obviously is a little bit of a developing storyline as it goes down. One of the players that's performing incredibly well that I had mentioned as potentially somebody that the Dodgers could have looked to trade was somebody like a Justin Robleski, who after this year is only going to have one minor league option year, which means he can only be sent down. And if they were going to utilize him the exact same way, they could only utilize him like that in 2026, then he'd be a free agent. And I think he's showcased enough to be able to go out and have a lot of value. The thing about Justin Robleski, though, and we saw this during his most recent outing against Tampa Bay, is he was absolutely effective. And looking at the Dodgers situation as far as their bullpen, and this is without everybody healthy, we'll go ahead and pull this up in just a second, the Dodgers bullpen right now. He very well could have been one that would have been on the outs, looking at Justin Robleski right here. It also could have been something where you're talking about a guy like an Alexis Diaz, who has showcased, I think, some positive things. If he can turn it around and you continue to have a lot of success from Justin Robleski, I think that's going to ease Dodgers fans' minds quite a bit as far as the success level that both of those guys could potentially have. It is a little bit more of a question mark, which, to be fair, it is a question mark with every relief pitcher that you go out and get. Yankees got 3 really, really solid relief pitchers, and they didn't perform well during their first appearance out there. Doesn't mean that they're not going to perform well going forward, but this is the decision that Dodgers decided to make. And when it comes to Brock Stewart, not just for the cost of what it cost to go out and get a Brock Stewart, which to go out and get a Brock Stewart only cost the Los Angeles Dodgers James Outman, which I say only because he was out of minor league options going into next season, which means he likely would not have been part of the plans for the Los Angeles Dodgers in 2026. And there's question marks as far as how the Dodgers and how other organizations would have valued him. Brock Stewart has been absolutely phenomenal for the Los Angeles Dodgers this year, and particularly against right-handed hitters. I pulled this up. This is from StatHead. This is 4 relief pitchers that have, I believe, at least 20 appearances or 15 I think it was 15 appearances that I put out there against right-handed hitters. This is the OPS for 2025 against right-handed hitters this year. Brock Stewart is second in Major League Baseball with just a 346 OPS on base percentage plus slugging. And this is from, I believe, 75 different batters faced. This information is courtesy of StatHead, which I believe requires some sort of subscription to be able to do. It's a 1.74 ERA against right-handed hitters. It's a lot of success that Brock Stewart has had against right-handed hitters, and that's primarily going to be the target that he's going to have. The question mark of all question marks is he going to stay healthy? Is Tanner Scott going to come back and return to form like the Dodgers had anticipated him to do? Are we going to get any production from a Kirby Yates? What are we going to see from a Bruce Gratterall? There is a lot of question marks that the Los Angeles Dodgers have that I think additional quantity would have helped ease the pain at least a little bit, especially if it was high profile or high production quantity would have helped ease the pain a little bit. But as far as going out and getting that dominant number one closer, the Dodgers, in their minds, feel like they did that during the offseason. And they feel like they got that in Tanner Scott. Now, I know the results aren't necessarily there right now, but that is what the mindset of the Los Angeles Dodgers, and you look at the history of what they're willing to do for relievers, they feel like they have the ability to turn around relief pitchers and turn them into great arms. They did the exact same thing with Anthony Banda. They did the same thing with an Evan Phillips. They did the same thing with Ryan Brazier. They feel like they have the ability to be able to turn out relief pitchers into those type of guys, and they feel like also, I believe, based on the things that they actually do, there's a couple of simultaneous things going on with the Dodgers. One, they have the mindset of go out, and if you're going to spend prospects, which you shouldn't really be totally afraid to go out there and spend prospects, do it of what's going to get you the greatest return, and that comes a little bit more from either starting pitching, which they have a lot of, or go out there and get additional position player talent as well. That's one thing. They also are, when you're looking at the state of the roster, they have a lot of expensive contracts. They also have a lot of aging players, which means they either are going to need an influx of young talent that comes up through the system, or they're going to need to utilize those guys to get external young talent, which when you're talking about this trade deadline and when you're talking about the fundamental needs that the Dodgers are going to need to have going forward in order to continue to be a top-of-the-line franchise, which we want this organization to go out there and win as many World Series championships as they possibly can. They have to go out there and make this roster and get younger talent in order to help supplement this. Because I don't know if the struggles of what we're seeing in Mookie Betts right now have to do, which I think they in part have to do, with what he had to go through at the beginning of the season with his sickness. I think in part that could be something that is in a very small part at least happens as a natural result of getting older and age. I think there's going to be some regression that we start to see at least a little bit from some of the aging players on this roster, which means that you need younger players to be able to help supplement that a little bit. And having the oldest offense in the game of baseball will come back at you at some point. So how do you supplement that? Either with young players coming up through the system or with going out and acquiring external talent, which does require either monetary value, which is a question mark of how much the Dodgers, they're willing to spend a lot of money. But how many of those long-term contracts could be a little bit of a question mark, or utilizing some of your prospect capital to go out and get some of the right fits. And you can go out and make just about any trade that you want that could have more of an impact long-term for the Los Angeles Dodgers on your overall state of roster. So there's a lot of different winds blowing at the exact same time to answer the super chat in a lot of different ways. Would I have met that cost to go out and get a Duran? I still believe that I would not have met that cost, but I would have gone out there and been a little bit more aggressive to get at least one more solid relief pitcher that probably would have been a rental. Probably a similar approach to what Texas took to either Coulomb or go out there and get a Brock Stewart, or not the Dodgers got him, but like a Phil Maton, or go out and get a Seranthony Dominguez like the Blue Jays did. That's a little bit more of the approach that I would have taken, as opposed to go out there and spending big on relief pitchers, for example, like a Yohan Duran. That's just my personal opinion. CNAV is mentioned. Can you compare Stephen Kwan's numbers with some of Alex Call's numbers? We did a little bit of that earlier. Catching up on some of the chat. Again, if you have disagreements, if you have different thoughts than I have, or if you're just plain frustrated with what the Dodgers did at the deadline, love to be able to interact with you and talk a little bit more about what the Los Angeles Dodgers actually did at this deadline. Gibson88, thank you very much for joining us. Lucy Chen, do you think Mookie can turn it around this season? If he can't, there's not enough deadline acquisition enough to go far in the playoffs. I don't know at this point with Mookie Betts, and we're starting to see a large enough sample size to where it becomes very much a question whether or not Mookie Betts is going to be able to turn it around this season. Let's go ahead. I'm going to just pull up his season numbers right now, just so you guys have an example of just how much Mookie Betts is struggling as an overall season. He has a 43 WRC plus since July 1st, so that has been much of a struggle. But it's not just that. Look at the overall season numbers. He's only batting .233 with a .305 on base percentage and .358 slugging percentage. It's an 85 WRC plus. And you look at the expected numbers, the expected weighted on base suggests that perhaps it could get a little bit better, but it's not too drastic of an upgrade. Only a 314 expected weighted on base. That's by far the lowest expected weighted on base average of his career. That measures quality of contact. Batting average and balls in play is low, but that's in part because the contact quality of what he's able to go out there has diminished quite a bit. His hard hit percentage is only at 33%, which is lowest of his career. It has been a massive struggle for Mookie Betts. And ultimately, for this team to go far, some of the right-handed hitters have to step up in a really big way. And this ultimately comes back to the star players on your team. As Mookie Betts is not able to do it, they're going to have excess performance from guys like a Teoscar Hernandez, or Will Smith has really stepped up and done a really well job, or Andy Pages is really going to have to take the mantle of it. But ultimately, Mookie Betts is going to have to be a real serious main contributor in order to help this team go out there and be successful. And I don't know if he's going to be that type of person at this point. If he is able to turn it around, though, there's nobody at the trade deadline that they could have gotten that could be as good as Mookie Betts has been in the past, and he certainly has the track record of having a lot of success. He's really going through it right now. So it is for the Dodgers in their best interest, hopefully, for Mookie Betts to be able to go out there and be somebody that can go out there and get a lot of success and do something and be the player that we know that he can be. Gibson88, are they just going to platoon Alex Call and Conforto in left? I don't necessarily think if that's the exclusive thing that they're going to do at this point, only because if you look at, especially with Michael Conforto, and this is something that I had pointed out in one of the most recent shows, one of the things that I typically look at is quality of contact and how they are actually able to do. And if we can actually get this load, because I think this is evident as to potentially why there could potentially be a turnaround, at least a little bit, with Michael Conforto. When we're looking at the Los Angeles Dodgers, and this is something that I pointed out to Casey a little bit ago, and we're looking exclusively at the expected weighted on base, or the expected weighted on base average, which I don't think is actually loaded at this point. We'll see if we can get the expected numbers to load in just a second, or if I can just go ahead and pull up the numbers. It looks like it's not necessarily loading at this point. So what we're going to do, we're going to look at Michael Conforto's numbers, because I think there is a vast difference between what he has been doing versus what the numbers suggest that he's going to do, which typically when I'm looking at free agent targets, I'm looking for what they're expected to do because I want to see what they're going to do going forward. When we're looking at Michael Conforto, it's only a 193 average, but here's the thing that's going to create a nice floor for him is he is able to walk a lot. His walk percentage is about 12%, which creates a really nice floor, especially when you're able to combine this with the expected statistics for expected weighted on base average, which expected WOBA. It tries to quantify or better quantify the actual results on the field. For example, with on-base percentage, it makes it equal singles and home runs, which we know that home runs are far better than what singles are. Just like triples are better than doubles, and triples are better than singles, and a single is slightly better than a walk. With on-base percentage, one of the flaws of that is it equates all of those values and makes them exactly the same. WOBA tries to go ahead and assign certain weights to particular outcomes based on what the math says they are worth run value-wise, meaning that a home run is going to be worth more than what a double is and a triple. And if we take that into account, not just with WOBA, but do it based off of the quality contact that comes off the bat, Michael Conforto has a 346 expected weighted on base average, which last that I checked, I believe that was 4th on the Los Angeles Dodgers, which means that if they still believe he can turn it around, and if he especially is one of the players that is actually contributing on offense, I believe when I looked at numbers since July 1st, it was Teoscar Hernandez who had a 69 WRC plus, and I think Andy Pages had a 79 WRC plus during that time period. Both of them are a little bit below league average. I don't necessarily know if it's Michael Conforto, at least with the way he has been swinging of late. That would be the one that would get an exclusive platoon with a player like an Alex Call. I think he's going to fit in, Alex Call is, and try to fit into the lineup maybe 2 to 4 times a week, and they're going to find different opportunities to be able to go ahead and do that. Certainly could be some platoon matchups to be able to take advantage, especially with Call being a righty and Conforto being a lefty, but I don't think it's going to be an exclusive platoon unless Conforto really starts to struggle again, and there starts to be a little bit of a struggle for him. Andre, thank you very much for joining us. Austin, can you have too much outfield depth in your system? We have 7 outfielders in our top 14 prospects. Is that too much? So, this particularly addresses the question of the Dodgers' move for Dustin May. Dustin May was traded from the Los Angeles Dodgers to the Boston Red Sox. In exchange, they got a couple of outfielders, a couple of really talented outfielders, James Tibbs III being the kind of headline piece of who the Dodgers were able to get back. He was somebody that was part of the San Francisco Giants and their trade for Rafael Devers. He was traded to Boston. The Dodgers got him back. They also got Zach Earhart, I believe is what his name is. He started having a little bit of success in Tulsa. Here's where it could be a little bit of an issue with having these many guys, is if the system gets clogged up too much to where you don't have enough playing time for each one of these guys, which this could particularly be an issue for next season in particular. And then we'll talk about how the Dodgers could go ahead and approach rectifying that particular issue. So a lot of these guys, especially a lot of the outfielders that the Dodgers have, and we're talking about some of the top guys, you're talking about a Zaire Hope, a Josue DePaula, Kendall George, Eduardo Quintero, Mike Sirota. All of those guys currently are at the high A level. They're with Great Lakes. Mike Sirota is injured. He will be out for, if not all of the season, a vast majority of the season. Will be eligible to come off the 60-day injured list, or won't be eligible to come off the 60-day injured list until beginning of September timeframe if he's able to come back. I don't know the extent of the injury, so I'm not going to speculate about what's going on with that. Josue DePaula is also dealing with some type of injury right now. That outfield is absolutely loaded with some of the top guys in the system. And yes, Kendall George is absolutely a difference maker with what he is able to do, and we can dive into that a little bit on a different episode. You also have, with some of the other guys that are in your system, now you have James Tibbs. You also have Zach Earhart, who are at the AA level, as well as a couple of other talented outfielders. You have a guy like Cole Myers, who's really stepping up this season. A couple of toolsy guys with like Chris Newell and a Damon Keith, who have struggled a little bit, but still have really good tools. You have a lot of these guys all piling up, and particularly when it comes to a lot of those guys, a lot of the guys that are down at Great Lakes have earned and likely should start the season at AA Tulsa next season at the very least. I don't necessarily think because of the moves that the Dodgers make that it's likely that any or most of those guys are going to be promoted this season, unless it's the last week of the season and Tulsa's going for a playoff push. I just don't see that as likely at this point. Could very well be proven wrong. We'll see. We'll see. But I don't think that's necessarily the case right now for them, which means that next year, you're going to have a big logjam of players that are at Tulsa. How they think about going that and how they deal with the promotions could be where there is a little bit of an issue for the Dodgers, especially because they have priority playing time for a lot of those guys, meaning those guys are playing 5 to 6 games a week. It's not going to be something where these guys are only going to get 3 games a week, or at least that's the ideal situation. That's not going to be the case for them. That's an issue for the Dodgers when you're talking about having too many outfielders in your system. However, and this is the counterpoint, and this is ultimately the reason, or one of the reasons why the Dodgers decided to go ahead and trade Dustin May, is because you go out and get as much talent as you possibly can, and then figure out what to do with that going forward. Meaning for players like James Tibb and Zach Earhart, both of those players were high-round draft picks in the 2024 draft, and have a lot of talent. I'm sure the Dodgers scouted them quite a bit. Tibbs being a first-round pick, Earhart being a 4th-round pick, I believe, for San Francisco and Boston, respectively. Both incredibly talented players, and obviously the scouts that the Dodgers have really like those guys and want them to be part of their system. They also don't just have a value for the Los Angeles Dodgers, but also because of their high pedigree, likely have a lot of value for other organizations. So it's not just a question of, hey, we're the Los Angeles Dodgers, why not go out and get an additional infield prospect, for example. For example, like if you wanted to go out and get a shortstop. Well, we'll go out and we won't trade for an outfielder. We'll trade for perhaps somebody that we view a little bit less on the spectrum that we are able to get, and go out and trade for a shortstop. No, the Dodgers, and I think this is what a lot of Major League front offices do, go out and get the most value that you can, and then figure it out from there. And I think this is particularly important for the Los Angeles Dodgers when you're talking about a team, an organization that needs as much talent as they possibly can. Know that they need an influx of young position player talent, and there could and likely is the most room available for outfielders going forward. You don't know if a Josue De Paula, Zaire Hope, Kendall George, Mike Sirota, Eduardo Quintero are going to stick at the major league level. But having a lot of guys as options could be an avenue that could help make your team good going forward. And this is something to keep in mind, because this is, for Dustin May, somebody who done a lot for the organization and meant a lot in his comeback. I commend him for what he's gone through and what he's done to fight to be back at the major league level. There is a question with the Dodgers as far as what his role would be and if he would be a good fit with the Dodgers right now. And so with the Los Angeles Dodgers and with Dustin May, if he's not necessarily a good fit, turning him into a couple of outfield prospects that you could either keep as part of your system or help supplement your system if you were to go out there and make a bigger trade during the offseason, which with the logjam that there is, particularly with the outfielders, I think is increasingly likely that the Dodgers go out and perhaps target some of the guys that they were interested in during this deadline. Perhaps they want to go out and get a Steven Kwan, but a Steven Kwan, not trading for him at the deadline, but when you have months to negotiate and with less club control for a Steven Kwan, could be a little bit cheaper. Or for like a Brendan Donovan. If they wanted to go out and get a Brendan Donovan, that could be something where now they have some additional pieces to be able to use to make that trade actually work. So when it comes to having a lot of outfield prospects as part of your system that are towards the top of some certain prospect rankings, it can have a little bit of an issue if you don't have playing time for them, which becomes a little bit of a trick for the organization of how they're able to supplement playing time. That's ultimately the job of the organization, to be able to figure that out and make sure that not just them, but some of the other guys get playing time. Get playing time as well. But when you're talking about value-wise, it also creates opportunities for you to be able to go out and make your team as good as you possibly can. Long question, or long answer to be able to answer that question, but really good question as far as what you have. Gibson 88, in my opinion, or replying to the super chat, in my opinion, we learned with Scott and Yates. I doubt the Dodgers will when it comes to acquiring relief talent. And this is something that I think is a really good reminder for the Dodgers, is that as much as there could be a sure bet, meaning that you think that a Yuan Duran or a Mason Miller or some of these guys are going to be sure bets to be really solid in the bullpen, it's a little bit of a question mark of whether they actually will be. Yes, there are players that have longer track records, and you can look at their track record and say that they're going to, but it is a bit of a risk. And with relief pitchers, because you can acquire these players and get players that are near as effective as some of the top-end guys with a significantly reduced cost, I think the risk-cost-benefit analysis that the Dodgers had made it to where it wasn't necessarily worth it to go out there and get those guys or make the investment for that, knowing what it would cost. CNAV, what are the comparison defensive metrics between Alex Call and Teoscar Hernandez? Everybody has been talking about a play call made that they don't think Teoscar would have made. So let's go ahead and look at that because I think it's important for you guys to know Alex Call with his defensive measures, what he's been able to produce both this year and his career, and particularly when it comes to defensive measurements. Two of the ones that I use some of the most, and this is if you paid attention to the prior to trade deadline, the two that I reported were defensive run saves and outs above average. They both tell slightly different things, but they're both pretty similar with the actual approach, and you can kind of get a little bit of comparison to each one of them. Important to note, they're both cumulative statistics, which means that the more playing time that you have, the more the ability you have to either earn or lose them. Exact same thing with like home runs. The more playing time that you have, the more ability that you have to hit additional home runs. Doesn't get into the negative in that aspect. When we're talking about Alex Call, currently on the season this year, which he has played all three outfield positions, mostly in right field, but can play center field and left field. He's at a two defensive run saves for outs above average. It is currently at a 1 in his career. Cumulative, you're talking about 4 seasons split between each one of these with limited-ish playing time. It's 10 outs above average and 10 defensive run saves. It's not the elite level defense as if they were going out there and getting a Harrison Bader, but it's still really solid defense that he has to be able to go out there and be successful. This is in comparison to a guy like a Teoscar Hernandez, who don't like picking on a lot of players, but Teoscar Hernandez has been limited in what he's been able to do defensively. What's unique about Teo is actually, and this was evident early in the season, defensive run saved actually really valued Teoscar Hernandez versus outs above average, which did not see what he was doing on the defensive side to be too great. So when we're talking about defensive runs saved on the year, Teoscar Hernandez is actually at a 0, meaning they believe, based on the metric defensive runs saved, he is a league average type of outfielder. However, when we use other metrics, Teoscar Hernandez is at a -8 outs above average. That is in the bottom percentile of Major League Baseball. So it's a question mark of which do you believe is more accurate of a statistic in measuring out, or looking at both of them and say Teoscar Hernandez is probably a little bit below league average outfielder, which I think it probably is a fair assessment of where they're at. And Alex Call, based on his career, is a little bit above league average outfielder, which means that you can help substitute an Alex Call late in games and feel fairly confident about what he's able to do defensively, whether it's in right field, whether it's in left field, or, and this is a little bit less limited playing time for him, potentially even center field as well. He could potentially have an option to go out there and get some playing time. Going into a few more questions, we got, I don't know, maybe about 20 minutes or so left before we'll go ahead and move on, which I know there's probably a lot of questions that I haven't been able to get to. Andre, when you have such a large number of players who are playing below their level, could this be the World Series hangover that we commonly see as a reason why teams do not repeat? Very well could be. It could just be that, especially with the Dodgers and their offensive slumps as of late, could just be something to where it's just a really tough time in the season, or some of the aging stuff is catching up to the Los Angeles Dodgers, or there's just a lot of things that are going on right now, and I don't necessarily know what it is. I know it is incredibly difficult to be able to go out there and repeat and win a World Series title in and of itself is as difficult as possible. And the Dodgers, let's say the Dodgers went out there and got a Yohan Duran. Let's say they even got another additional high leverage bullpen piece, or actually, let's say they got Yohan Duran and they got Steven Kwan. Let's say the Dodgers were ultra aggressive, decided similar approach to the San Diego Padres and utilize a ton of their prospect capital to go out there and get those players. I don't necessarily know. It's not guaranteed that the Dodgers would go out there and win a World Series, nor do I know with the randomness of Major League Baseball in the postseason, which you can have. There is a lot of randomness that happens in the postseason. Take it a step back. Arizona Diamondbacks versus Texas Rangers World Series back in 2023. The Philadelphia Phillies were the 6th seed, I believe, in 2022 when they made their run to the World Series. The Atlanta Braves the year before that, I don't remember exactly what seed they were during the postseason, but they went out there and made a run. There's been a lot of randomness that has happened in World Series past and postseason past, especially when you're talking about a 5-game or 7-game series. There's a lot of teams that can go out there and win those series. So trying to go out there and present yourself with as many opportunities to go out there and win the World Series with an incredibly talented club, meaning that it's not just pushing all the chips in because you want to win just the 2025 World Series. You also want to win the 2026 World Series and hopefully the 2027 World Series and so on and so forth, and presenting yourself with as many chances to be able to win World Series as possible. I think that's something that the Dodgers are wanting to do because I don't think this team ever wants to go through a rebuild. And if you continually go out there and push your chips all in, eventually that is likely to come back and bite you. And that perhaps this is something with somebody that watched up close and personal being here in the state of Michigan, the Detroit Tigers do that and went through an extended rebuild, an extended period of bad baseball. That is something that I'm sure the Los Angeles Dodgers, they're in a little bit of a different situation. They have more monetary value, and they seemingly have had a better infrastructure than what the Tigers had at the time that they were entering their rebuild. I still have some concerns with doing that, and I think the Dodgers want to make as smart of decisions as they possibly can. And with this trade deadline, they are trusting with the process that they have. It's a little bit of a risk doing that, especially with some unknowns going into there, and I'm sure that leaves a lot of people with frustration, but they trust the process of what they have and what they are going to. The Dodgers trust their system, they trust their process. We'll see if it works and see if it presents with as many chances to win World Series championships as possible, because that is something we know the Dodgers are as talented as any team in the game of baseball. The season just got a little bit tougher, though, with some of the moves that other teams had made. Let's go through a couple of these. Gibson, 88 man, and wanted Quan. Yes, we'll see if the Dodgers target him during the offseason or upcoming seasons as well. Tony says the Dodgers have done everything to fix Mookie except try him in right field. Why don't they at least do that for a few games? If nothing else is working, that option is staring at you. I think it's because they have the outfield depth that they're looking for. They have Michael Conforto, which, yes, they feel somewhat confident, at least with Michael Conforto. You can look at the 193 batting average of the season. I think there's some underlying metrics in some of the recent numbers that to suggest that he's playing a little bit better than that. Teoscar Hernandez has struggled a little bit as of late, but they still feel like the track record that he has showcases his ability to do well. They also have Andy Pages and Alex Call. All four of those guys are really solid options that they feel like right now. When you're talking about Mookie Betts and potentially changing a position, if they were to do that, and this is especially apparent with Max Muncy coming back. I don't know if he'll be back today. It's possible that he has already been added back to the team. But if you wanted to move things around, I think the one change that you potentially could make, especially with Tommy Edman likely to going onto the injured list, is if you wanted to play Alex Freeland at his natural position at shortstop, you could potentially move Mookie Betts to second base. I think if they were to move Mookie Betts, which it's not a guarantee that they're going to move Mookie Betts because it could get him out of the rhythm moving him off of shortstop, and he hasn't been bad defensively at shortstop. In fact, he's been a little bit above league average as a shortstop this season, and I don't think that's necessarily the reason as to why he's been struggling offensively. I don't think it's exclusively the shortstop position as to why that's the issue that he's been struggling. If they were to do that, though, I think they would be moving Mookie Betts potentially to second base. And where that runs into a little bit of a risk of doing that is if they decide to move Mookie Betts to second base, they could potentially permanently be moving Mookie Betts to second base, which could be seen as a little bit of an inevitability, but then you'd be relying upon a Alex Freeland to take the reins of the shortstop position, at least for an extended period of time. Or potentially relying upon a Tommy Edman when he comes back, who he has not played the shortstop position at all this season, to take the reins at the shortstop position, or a little bit more of a Miguel Rojas. It becomes a little bit of a question mark at the shortstop position, again, where Mookie Betts was at least able to provide defensive stability. So they got to try something to be able to get Mookie Betts to be able to work. They moved him back down into the 2-hole. I would not be surprising if the continued struggles happen. They move him down in the batting order, and ultimately that it could be something that very well is very much needed, justified by the numbers that he's putting up. But as far as the actual results of what Mookie Betts has been doing and moving him out to right field, roster-wise, I think it makes more sense to keep him in the infield, and if they were to move positions, move him over to second base. CNAV, hit that like button for Austin. He spends a lot of time researching to do these shows happen. You can't get content like this on other podcasts. Yeah, and actually pointed that out. And I want to showcase you guys and bring you guys a little bit into date, because I'm doing a little bit of research right now, and I've had a little bit of time to be able to do this, particularly since the trade deadline. What I wanted to do a little bit, and this is particularly in comparison to some of the approaches that the Dodgers had made, and the San Diego Padres had made, because there's a difference, at least a little bit, in level of aggressiveness, particularly when it comes to going out there and making those big trades. And I don't think it was, I think it's more apparent right now than it perhaps has been based on the moves that AJ Preller and the San Diego Padres made at the trade deadline. So actually what I wanted to do, and this is a little bit of research that I have, I've given you a little bit of a sneak preview of perhaps what is going on. I actually have done a little bit of research, and particularly when it comes to trades that the San Diego Padres and the Los Angeles Dodgers have made over since 2020 is when I did it. Now, I decided to do this. I believe I did this, and it could be a little bit different from the Dodgers, because I didn't want to include Mookie Betts in this discussion, which would improve the Dodgers' fortune of where it's at, although not necessarily, because how I have this in mind with this analysis that I have is, what are you trading for, and for that period that you're trading for, how much value are you actually getting? So what I'm going to turn it over to right now is we're actually going to look at the value, look at a little bit of a sneak peek of what I've been working on a little bit to be able to showcase you guys what's going on right here. So this right here is, and there's a couple of different tabs that we might potentially turn to, is Dodgers versus Padres comparison, which again, this is not meant as a let's pick on the San Diego Padres because I'm a Dodgers fan. Let's go ahead and do a fair comparison between the two, because I think there are benefits and insight that potentially we could have from the San Diego Padres as an organization, but also a perhaps justification for the approach that the Los Angeles Dodgers are doing, and appreciation for the differences between the two, and then make a determination of what's going on going forward. So this is the San Diego Padres. This is as best as I possibly could do, which I could be missing some of these. For example, I believe with the Dodgers thing, I believe that I don't have the Manny Margot and the trade that he had, which I believe netted the Los Angeles Dodgers Noah Miller. I don't believe I have that trade completely in here. But what we have right here, this is the San Diego Padres. What you're going to see in this column is the player that the Padres traded for, as well as right here, this is their Fangraphs WAR. Now, wins above replacement is a statistic, and I have to state this quite a bit because there's people that perhaps don't necessarily completely understand WAR and what it's intended to do. When you're talking about WAR, it is a cumulative statistic, meaning that the more playing time that you have, the more that you can earn it, and the better that it is. And it's in comparison to a generic replacement level player, meaning that you have a positive value. That means you're better than what a replacement level player is. And the more playing time that you have, the more time that you have to add to WAR. Think of WAR like home runs. The more playing time that you get, the more ability that you have to go out there and hit home runs. The more playing time that you have, the more opportunities that you have to be able to accumulate wins above replacement on the playing field, which means that wins above replacement intends to look at all aspects of a baseball field and intends to look at offense, defense, base running, all of those different aspects. And it's intended to be a numeric value to be able to showcase the results that they have. So what I have right here is 2020 through 2025, which there's no numbers that have been updated because of the trade deadline. All the different moves that the Padres and then eventually the Dodgers have made at the trade deadline that I could potentially find during my very short time that I was able to do research. So we have who they're traded for, their Fangraphs wins above replacement. Up here is I have the Fangraphs WAR that the Padres were able to acquire by year, meaning how much WAR on average are they able to generate because they made some sort of trade, and this is based on the overall production value that they were able to acquire through all of these moves, or overall production that they were able to get. For example, with a Blake Snell. Blake Snell had a couple of years, 3 years to be exact, when he came over from the San Diego Padres, that ultimately netted the San Diego Padres 9.8 wins above replacement, meaning on average that got them about 3 wins above replacement that they wouldn't have gotten if they had not necessarily made that trade. And so we have Fangraphs wins above replacement divided by the year, which this is divided by, I believe, 4.5 is what it is. We also have postseason win probability added, which this is for an individual game. If you played in the postseason, what was the win probability added that you had during that given postseason game? So was there postseason success that they had? There wasn't a postseason WAR measure that you could have. This was the measure that I tried to use. Perhaps we can dive a little bit into this in a little bit of a later date. Also, we have years of control. When you trade for an asset, how many years of control do they have? Or what is the prospect grade? And for this, I tried to utilize MiLB pipeline, just the 20 to 80 overall grade that an individual prospect had. Obviously, there's different evaluations at different systems, and most importantly, than different organizations have. But this gives us a little bit of a baseline as to what's going on. The players that are highlighted in gray have already completed their tenure under either that contract or within the organization that the organization traded for. And if there's a player that is not highlighted, they're still within that organization, which means this trade is still not necessarily complete. So, for example, Mike Clevenger netted the San Diego Padres 1.1 Fangraphs WAR during his 2.5 years of control with the Padres. I don't remember if they traded. I think they traded him potentially at some point. I don't remember exactly, or released him. So they netted him that. And you can see that for that trade, they traded away Austin Hedges, Gabriel Arias, Owen Miller, Josh Naylor, Joey Cantillo, and Cal Quantrill. And you can see the Fangraphs WAR that they were able to generate during this tenure. And so what I wanted to do going through this process is look at, for the San Diego Padres, with as many trades as I possibly could, how much wins above replacement did they actually bring in, at least to this point in the trades that they have, which these trades are not complete because there's a lot of young talent that they either acquired or traded away, versus how much did they actually give up during this process. And you can see with the San Diego Padres, with the trades that they have made over the past tenure, they have acquired 49.6 Fangraphs weighted runs, or Fangraphs wins above replacement. versus when they traded away, they have traded away 58.1 Fangraphs wins above replacement. Now, there's a couple of things to note. One, just because you have a deficit in this area does not necessarily mean that's a bad thing, as long as those players were able to help you go out and be as successful as you possibly can be. So, for example, with this deficit that the Padres have, which is not too terribly significant right now, a lot of these players were able to help the Padres be incredibly competitive during their run. So, for example, they've had some successful ones. For example, the Blake Snell trade. Great trade for the San Diego Padres. They traded away Blake Hunt, Francisco Mejia, Luis Patino, and Cole Wilcox. The only player that is still within the Tampa Bay's organization is Cole Wilcox. And it is a vast difference in wins above replacement between those players. The Joe Musgrove trade, a little bit of a equal trade. Joe Musgrove is highlighted only because he signed an extension after his deal was done with the San Diego Padres, but during that tenure, 6.7 wins above replacement, pretty even across the board right there. Some of the other trades, and this is the one that gets highlighted quite a bit because it cost a lot, was the trade for Juan Soto. It cost the San Diego Padres C.J. Abrams, Robert Hassel III, James Wood, Mackenzie Gore, and I believe this guy is one of the top prospects within the Nationals organization right now. So there was absolutely a cost to go out and get a Juan Soto, which cost the San Diego Padres quite a bit of good players. But as an overall whole, which this also does include when the Padres traded out a Juan Soto and got Michael King and some of their starting pitching depth that they have, overall and as a whole, the prospects of which they've acquired or the guys that they've acquired versus the talent of which they've traded out has been roughly even, if not slightly worse for the Padres, highlighted particularly because of trades like the Padres versus Nationals trade, which I think will continue to get a little bit worse for the Padres because the Nationals have a lot of talent in that trade. One also thing to note, this does not include any further extensions of the trade. For example, if Austin Hedges got traded immediately after the Guardians acquired Austin Hedges, does not include any value that they got for that. Otherwise, that branching would take quite a bit of long. So it's perhaps more fair to say teams acquired a little bit more than this value. There certainly was a price to be able to get in order to get. There is a high price in order to be able to go out there and get the talent that the Padres have. Versus if we go over here to the Los Angeles Dodgers and we talk about this deficit, the moves the Dodgers made versus the talent that they got back, which again, this is after the 2020 season has started, which does not include the Mookie Betts trade that they had made before the season. The Dodgers acquired 26.7 wins above replacement, Fangraphs wins above replacement, versus 17.9 that they have traded away at the trade deadline or at the trade deadline or during the offseason. And this includes moves like the Max Scherzer and Trey Turner move that they made, highlighted by Josiah Gray and Keibert Ruiz, the prospects that they traded away. This also includes, for example, the Joey Gallo trade, which didn't necessarily work out too well as far as what he was able to do for the Dodgers with that. Miguel Rojas was a player that they traded. Includes the Lance Lynn trade that they had. The Tyler Glasnow trade could be one of those to keep an eye on because Tyler Glasnow signed an extension shortly after this. I believe only had 1 year of club control, so the extension doesn't necessarily count on that, whereas Pepio and DeLuca going to continue to go out there and be on the teams. Michael Busch trade is also included in this. So what I'm intended to do with this is particularly look at how many wins above replacement the Dodgers have traded away, Padres have traded away, versus how much have they actually gotten back in terms of respected value. And this certainly is not finished because there's a lot more time that has to be done with all of these. But I think it's fair to say with the wins above replacement that each team traded away, it's likely that those players are going to continue to accumulate a little bit more. So this will probably even out a little bit, if not go a little bit negative in the Dodgers' direction. Versus this will probably also increase the Fangraphs WAR that other teams have versus what the Padres have, meaning it costs a lot to be able to do that. I just wanted to highlight this. The Padres are much more active on this market, whereas, and this is when we're doing this next element, off-season signings. The Dodgers, because of the ability of what they have right now, have the ability to go out there and make additional signings in free agency with the resources that they have, and they see that as a little bit more of a cost-effective way to go out there and make some big impact moves. So when we're talking about the San Diego Padres and the moves that they have made during the offseason, or the extensions that they have signed to players, which includes a Tatis Jr. extension. It includes the Manny Machado additional extension that he had received on his contract. What this includes is the years of the contract that they had signed, as well as the total money owed to these players, not taking into account any sort of deferred payments or anything like that, as well as the total Fangraphs wins above replacement those players have generated to this point for their respective teams, as well as for Fangraphs wins above replacement. When you sign a guy, when you extend a guy, how much WAR are you getting per year? And then what is the postseason win probability added with these free agency contracts or extensions? The San Diego Padres have spent $1.5 billion since 2021 on these type of contracts, and to this point have accumulated 80 Fangraphs wins above replacement, or 8.6 per year if you were to generate what it would actually be on average. And I believe to do that, did the accumulation of the WAR divided by how many years they actually have, and each one of these is a little bit individualized depending on the length of the contract that they have. For example, with Fernando Tatis and his calculation for it, it's divided by the Fangraphs WAR divided by the number of years, but not exactly that because it hasn't been 11 years yet. So it's not completely fair to divide it by 11 years versus Ha-Seong Kim, who's already completed his contract with the Padres. Be totally fair to divide that by 4. Instead, this is divided by 4.5 because it's been 4.5 years since the start of the 2021 season. So we can see through free agency, the Padres on average on year get about 8.6 Fangraphs wins above replacement from free agency. Whereas with the Los Angeles Dodgers, and this is, you can see a difference in monetary investment that the Dodgers have made. Dodgers have made, based on this calculation, $2.7 or $2.75 billion in free agency commitments that they have made to players or extensions that they've made to players, and that has ultimately accumulated them 118 Fangraphs wins above replacement to this point. That is 15.6 Fangraphs wins above replacement per year that they are able to generate through free agency on average, which this includes the Freddie Freeman extent. This includes the Mookie Betts extension that he was able to get, which 12 years, $365 million that they got. He's earned 20 Fangraphs wins above replacement to this point. That's on average 4.4 Fangraphs WAR per season. You look at Freddie Freeman, he's averaged close to 6 Fangraphs wins above replacement to this point in his Dodgers tenure, and includes a lot of different contracts that the Dodgers were able to get out. Some years a little bit shorter term deals. You can see 2023 very much gearing up for the 2024 offseason, where the Dodgers went out and spent big on Ohtani, Yamamoto, gave the Will Smith extension, Glasnow extension, extended Max Muncy a little bit more, and all of those have generated the Dodgers a lot of value when it comes to that. The 2025 offseason is certainly something we'll have to keep our eye out for in the future, because it hasn't necessarily been great to this point, in part because Blake Snell has been injured, and some of the other players that they got haven't necessarily been quite as good as anticipated. With Teoscar Hernandez, he's only been at a 0.6 for average of what his Fangraphs WAR could be, 0.3 on the season. So what this is intended to highlight, and the reason why I'm doing this, is you can see the Dodgers' approach to acquiring talent versus the Padres' approach to acquiring talent is a little bit different, meaning an average Fangraphs wins above replacement that they generate per year comes from a little bit of different areas. From the Padres, they're far more aggressive on the trade deadline, which means they have on average accumulated 9 wins above replacement from the trade deadline, what they have from either at the trade deadline or trades during the offseason. I keep saying the trade deadline, but really it's trades that they have versus the Dodgers. About 5 is what they're able to generate from that versus free agency, and this is where the Dodgers are a little bit more aggressive and can be more aggressive than the Padres. It's 15.5 for the Dodgers and about 8.5 that the Padres are able to generate. And this is particularly important because with the Padres, and this is where I have to give a little bit of credit to the San Diego Padres, they have done a really, really good job being able to go out there and add additional talent and scout and find additional talent to be able to add into their system, which has allowed them to be able to go out there and make as many trades as possible. There's a couple of issues with that, is that you have to continually go out there and not just find valuable players, but find valuable players that other organizations are going to value. And this is something to where when we're talking about prospect capital, and what the Dodgers and Padres are able to do. This is post-trade deadline. This is MLB Pipeline's rankings, which I don't take them as something to be the total end-all, be-all of everything. I think there's a lot of different evaluations that you can have. But right now, there's a vast difference between the Dodgers and the Padres in their prospect capital of what they're going to have going forward, because after the trade deadline, you were looking at MLB Pipeline's rankings, grades for prospects. There's 60, or there's a 20 through 80 scale. This is the overall ranking. Right now, the Dodgers, as listed by MLB Pipeline, which there's other organizations that have some of these players as better than a 55, the Dodgers have currently 6 55 grade prospects, 5 50 grade prospects, and 10 45 grade prospects. Versus the Padres, who, after the trade deadline, according to MLB Pipeline, have 1 55 grade prospect, 2 50 grade prospects, and 5 45 grade prospects. The only reason why I'm highlighting the grading of the prospects per MLB Pipeline is this is indicative of the potential talent level pool that the Dodgers and Padres have to be able to go out there and address additional needs going forward, which this is especially apparent because if you look at the upcoming free agencies that some of these teams have, or Padres and Dodgers in particular, Dylan Cease is going to be a free agent. Nestor Cortez will be a free agent. They just acquired him. Michael King is one of those players that has a $15 million mutual option that very well could lead to him reaching free agency this upcoming season. Luis Arias, Ryan O'Hearn, and then Jose Iglesias for the Padres versus the Dodgers, Clayton Kershaw, Michael Kopech, Kirby Yates, Kike Hernandez, Miguel Rojas, and Michael Conforto. Which means, and this is especially apparent, we'll cut it back to here, Padres also have a lot of players that are under contract that are going to be under contract for a long period of time that will enter into their age 40 season when those players are entering or ending their tenure of their contract. Think of players like a Yu Darvish, who is under contract, and I'll pull this up in just a second. I believe he's under contract for, 2 or 3, it might be 3 seasons after this year. Which this is not to say that Yu Darvish is a bad player at all, but that is a big investment that is being made for them as an organization. There's other players, like they have big investment in Manny Machado, who's getting older, a big investment in Xander Bogaerts. There's a lot of main investments that they have, which I think they looked at the organization. They also looked at the state of the Los Angeles Dodgers and realized now is a good time to be able to capitalize, which I got to give the Padres credit for actually going out there and doing that. And it certainly is a fun thing for the game of baseball that other teams are going out there and trying to be as competitive as they possibly can be right now. The Dodgers are, as an organization, are able to go out there and make a lot of different moves. And I think ultimately, with the process that they have, can go out there and acquire a lot of different talent in a lot of different ways. Yeah, looking at some of the contracts, Yu Darvish is under contract through the 2028 season. He is currently in his age 39 season right now. So he will be getting a little bit older as time goes on. So there's a lot of different contracts, and I think with the Padres, one of their best times to be able to strike is right now with the core that they have versus the Dodgers, which, yes, their core is going to get older, but they also have the opportunity as an organization based on the approach that they have and based on the talent level that exists within their system to not just view 2025 as the last chance to go out there and win a World Series, but to go out there and view every single year as a chance to win a World Series. And especially with the variability that postseasons have, it can be one of those things where the Dodgers compete each and every single year and win as many World Series championships as they possibly can be. That's a little bit of an inside peek. If you have any sort of suggestions as far as how I should or things I should add to that list, I'd be certainly more than willing to be able to hear what you guys think about that. We'll get to a couple last comments before I do have to go. I'm running a little bit later than what I normally have right now, so we'll get to a couple of comments right now. Let's see. CNAV, Tanner Scott has been leaving his slider in the middle of the plate. That's been what's been getting hammered. Yeah, hopefully he's able to come back and be somebody that can be really effective. Chuck Holston, thank you for joining us as well. CNAV, I'm glad they moved Bobby Miller to the bullpen. Hopefully his fastball plays up, and please start cutting or two-seamer your fastball. Yeah, hopefully Bobby Miller can go out there and be a lot of success. And that is somebody that I know Casey will have a lot of insight on because he has more eyes and access to Oklahoma City than I do and gets to watch a lot of their games more than what I do as well. Let's see. Maton went to Texas is where Phil Maton was able to go. Let's go to a couple of these right now. CNAB, I think Vesia should get the ball in the 9th. That's until Trinan is able to get his command back. I totally agree with that. Vesia has been absolutely phenomenal, and he's got that fire that you like from some of your late inning guys, and just be completely fired up during those late inning type of environments. He could potentially be that guy that you turn to until you wait for a Tanner Scott to be able to come back and then see what happens from there, or at least until Blake Trinan is able to get his command, as you had mentioned, just right. Get to a couple of others. Chris, Vesia in the 9th, Brock Stewart in the 8th, Dreyer in the 7th, etc. I like Brock Stewart as that guy that you particularly use as a matchup against right-handed hitters. I think if he goes up there and matches up too much against left-handed hitters, that could come back to bite him, because I think his stuff plays a lot better, at least this season, that against right-handed hitters, and the numbers bear it out, than it does against left-handed hitters. So I think you can be opportunistic about who you actually go out there and match up Brock Stewart with. We'll get to a couple of more comments right here. There's a lot that I'm going to be missing out of, so I apologize for missing out on some of the comments right now. CNAV, does the addition of Call take playing time away from Esteury Ruiz? I believe so. I think it's going to be somebody that takes away the playing time, but also it's something where I don't know what exactly the playing time they were planning on giving him anyway was. When Max Muncy comes up, I would anticipate it would be Tommy Edman probably going to the IL. So that would probably be the move. I don't see them switching out Esteury Ruiz at this point right now. Going to question, I'm getting more baseball stats, and from what I've learned, one stat that encapsulates a batter's offensive contribution the best is WRC+. Do you agree? Yes. So when it comes to offensive production, or when you're trying to make a quick comparison between players, I think WRC+ is the best tool to be able to do, and I'll give you the reason why. Talked a little bit about WOBA, weighted on base average. That puts weights to offensive measures than what you have for each one of the baseball stats. As I had mentioned before, home runs are better than singles. With batting average, home run is just as good to batting average as a single is. That's not great. When it comes to on-base percentage, exact same thing. Home run, just as good as a single. That's not great. When it comes to slugging, that adds that as different additional elements, but it also doesn't take into account walks. So two of the main measures when it comes to comparing players' offensive ability that in this new age of statistics is OPS plus and WRC plus. And I like WRC plus a little bit more. OPS plus adds on-base percentage and slugging to create OPS. there's not too much of a difference in the kind between OPS and weighted runs created plus, but I think weighted runs created plus is a little bit more refined in how it weights different measures. For example, with OPS plus, I believe it's pretty much the exact same weight as to a single and a walk, and I think there's a slight different variation that WRC plus covers in that comparison. When you see a statistic that has a plus at the end of it, that means that you're making some type of comparison against league average. So 100 is going to be league average. Anything above that is going to be better than league average. Anything below that is going to be below league average. So with WRC plus, if you want to compare X player to Y player, WRC plus as a numeric measure or as a way to be able to make a quick comparison, really good tool. One thing to keep in mind is you have to also take into account playing time. For example, a player can have 10 games and have 150 WRC plus. Is that player better than a player that has 140 games on the season and a 150 WRC plus? Well, their WRC plus would say they're the exact same player. However, if you play 150 games or 140 games and have 150 WRC plus versus you only play 10 games and have 150 WRC plus, the player that played 140 games had more of an impact on the team than the player that just played 10 games, and the 10 games is not as good of a sample as 140 is. So with WRC plus, it's a good comparison when you're comparing players, but always keep into account the sample size of what you were dealing with. But that, I believe, would be the best offensive measure of what you have. If you're looking for comparison with cumulative measures as opposed to WRC plus, that's when I bring up weighted runs above average, which is a completely underrated baseball statistic because it's the exact same thing, except instead of the 100 being league average, it just puts an actual numeric value to it. And then you can make some sort of comparison with additional playing time right there. But that is just me with the measures. WRC plus is a good tool to be able to use. Let's see. Bruce Davis. So we got 7 outfielders and may trade, adds 2 more. That's 9 that we're holding on to prospects. And then says that Freeman is scared to make moves if all these guys are so good, and none of us know if any of these guys will even pan out. Yes, that's exactly right. We don't know if they're going to pan out, which means that in part you want many guys so that some of those guys can pan out, because it's a necessity for the Los Angeles Dodgers that some of those guys are able to pan out and make it to the league, because this offense will not be able to survive if they age out of if the core of this team ages out, which is a very real concern with having the oldest offense in the game of baseball. There's a lot of different outfielders, and we addressed it a little bit prior to that, is you don't have to keep all of these guys right now. Mike Sirota is currently on the injured list, so is a Josue de Paula. I'm sure they can find different playing time for each one of these guys, and it's imperative for the Dodgers to be able to find those additional playing time, but you also have those resources to be able to potentially trade them. And so would you rather have a Dustin May that you potentially DFA, or additional pieces that either you utilize them for a trade during the offseason for potentially somebody that makes an impact to your big league team, or use them as supplemental pieces if you wanted to trade some of the other players that might be a little bit higher ranked and still have good prospect capital within your system. That's ultimately the approach that the Dodgers have, and to why they're going ahead and keeping all of these guys. That would be my counter argument to what you were saying. CNAV, we've got Ryan Ward raking in AAA Oklahoma City. Isn't even listed in the top 30 prospects for LA. Yeah, he is absolutely killing it. He deserves an opportunity somewhere, and I desperately hope that he's able to get it. Al Minerva, let's see. Continuing on with a couple of comments right now. Ruben, can the Dodgers still add Joe Kelly to their roster as an unsigned free agent? They technically could sign Joe Kelly. The question is he better than any of the guys, relief pitchers that are currently on their roster? Is he better than an Anthony Banda? Is he better than an Alexis Diaz? Is he better than a Justin Robleski? What happens when those guys come back and are healthy, or when Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates come back and they're healthy and have to be on the major league roster? That's where a little bit of some of the questions come up. Chuck Olson, hit a like button. Comment on the show also helps. Absolutely does. Austin, from an analytical point of view, what is keeping Ward in AAA not being given an MLB shot? I don't know from an analytical point of view, because he's absolutely killing it in AAA. I don't remember exactly what the numbers are, but he leads basically all of minor league baseball in home runs at AAA, and is absolutely incredible. I think it has to do with contract situation and ability to have a fit with the Los Angeles Dodgers, and ultimately they believe in the investment in a Michael Conforto, and clearly with the moves that they made at the trade deadline, they believe in that investment enough to stick around with Michael Conforto for a little bit. Ryan Ward is getting a little bit up there in age. I believe he's 27, as Chuck Huddleston is saying. But I think that ultimately is wise. There wouldn't really, in their view, see a really good role for him. There's also a little bit of question marks if you want to question the profile defensively. Very much more of a, I would say, in the outfield, a little bit more of a left field option. Maybe not necessarily the greatest outfield defender, which if they're looking to add additional pieces, they would probably want them to be a little bit better on the defensive side of the ball. But Ryan Ward deserves an opportunity somewhere, and it is my hope that he exits the season apart from the Los Angeles Dodgers organization, gets that opportunity that he desperately deserves. Leo, any chance we see another prospect make his big league debut this season? It's certainly possible that we see one of those prospects come up. Who exactly that would be, I'm a little bit hesitant to be able to say, because I think they like where the position player talent is, and it is difficult to be able to project position player injuries that come up. When it comes to pitchers, there could potentially always be additional options that you throw out there, but I don't know who necessarily that would be at this point when you're talking about different guys. A lot of guys that have been brought up late in the season are guys that are going to have to be added to be protected from the Rule 5 draft during this upcoming season, and I don't necessarily know if all of them are going to be the ones that they want to bring up. Like, for example, I don't know if they want to call up right now and Garrett McDaniels or Ronan Kopp or a Jose Rodriguez or Peter Hubeck. I don't necessarily know if all of them are completely ready. The one that probably is the closest, even though it's been a little bit of struggle back and forth, even though the strikeout stuff is insane, is Jose Rodriguez. He might be the guy that I keep an eye on for a little bit, only because I think there's a good chance that they potentially protect him from the Rule 5 draft, especially if they like the stuff from a guy like a Paul Gervais. Jose Rodriguez would be somewhat similar-ish of a profile, high strikeouts at the minor league level, good swing and miss stuff. Both of those guys were at the top level, but that's only if an opportunity arises in which they have an open 40-man roster spot to be able to do. CNAV makes a statement, which I'll assume that this is correct only because I have not had a chance to be able to do that. It sounds like Jack Little was designated for assignment. They did claim Lucan Baker from St. Louis. We'll get to that in a little bit on a different show just because I don't have time to be able to do a lot of research into that. Lucy Chen, do you think Alex Freeland is here to stay? He can easily replace Rojas. I think he's here at least for the next little bit while Hae-Sung Kim is on the injured list and while Kike Hernandez is also on the injured list, and they also have Tommy Edman on the injured list. I think the next move after Max Muncy comes up, I think they probably put Tommy Edman on the IL, and then whenever next guy is healthy, it probably is Esteury Ruiz, just because it's difficult to have 4 exclusive outfielders on the club. And then it probably becomes a question at some point, especially if Hae-Sung Kim comes back, who do the Dodgers want to keep around, Hae-Sung Kim or Alex Freeland? And Alex Freeland needs to play quite a bit in order to continue his development, and I think that's what they have to do in order to keep them going right now. Let's go ahead. One more comment or so right now. Let's see, continuing right now. Austin, planning for shows this week. It's a good question. I'm not exactly sure what the shows are going to be this week. I know Casey's going to have a lot of shows right now. Wednesday, I still got to figure out what exactly is going on, where that's able to fit in with the rest of the different shows and different things that we're able to do. So I'm not exactly sure yet. Casey will be on here. I know he'll be live quite a bit, and I'm sure that Casey and I are going to try to go live at some point. I believe I'm going to Great Lakes for games on Thursday and Friday in Midland this week, so there might be a little bit difficulty later in the week to be able to do so. We'll figure out what is able to happen going forward. And then Gibson88, do you have any idea of next year's free agents or possible trades? Food for thought. I actually been thinking about that quite a bit. I don't have a list of names though, because I wanted to get the aspect of seeing the ways that they approach them as before trying to figure that out. But the list of players that the Dodgers potentially could target expanded because of the moves that the Dodgers made at the trade deadline. And then last comment, can we find space for Freeland now that Muncy is back? It's going to be a little bit more difficult in playing time. With Alex Freeland, natural shortstop, played a lot of third base to try to figure things out. I have seen Alex Freeland at the second base position. He played there briefly during his time in Great Lakes in 2024 when both him and Noah Miller split the shortstop position during the first month of the 2024 season. I don't believe there would be any difficulty of him being able to adjust at the second base position, but it's also not his naturalist position and one that he has played a whole lot. And so it's totally possible if they want to get him some playing time, they're not going to platoon him necessarily with Max Muncy. Max Muncy is an everyday player, and Alex Freeland is better as a left-handed hitter than he is a right-handed hitter. Creates a little bit of a complication. But if you want to give Mookie Betts a little bit of additional rest, or if you potentially are tired of Mookie Betts or want to try to switch things up a little bit and move Mookie Betts to second base, Alex Freeland is more than capable of playing not just a solid shortstop, but a really good shortstop for the Los Angeles Dodgers. That's going to do it here. Dodgers Dawgs is part of the Dodgers Daily Network. Went far longer than what I was anticipating it going. This is a full hour and a half show. I appreciate you guys for tuning in and being able to communicate. We will be back here at some point throughout the week with additional shows. Until next time, though, thank you very much for tuning in, and go Dodgers.